It's another opportunity to try to push through a section of the revelation that God the Father willed for his Son to give to an angel. I got my answer right here, but she's biting her lip. Who gave this revelation to? I won't know. We're at the angel. The angel gave the revelation to John, who gave it to 7 churches. Oh, now we're really going to go crazy. Can we name them? Maybe we open our Bibles to the 2nd chapter of Revelation. I'll let y'all look. And the 7 churches are Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, what? Eczema, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. I'm teaching these again in Spanish churches on Friday nights, and we are just getting to Laodicea in the letters to the 7 churches. And these letters are very important because these letters are giving them an evaluation. And let me tell you, when the Bible tells or teaches or shows something, we need to really listen carefully. If the Lord would evaluate his 7 churches, would he not therefore evaluate every individual son and daughter of those 7 churches, including us? And he would tell them, this is what you've done well, and this is what I have against you. You need to correct. And if you correct what I have, or if you continue doing the well that you're doing, this is the blessing that I have for you. It's a good model for us. It's a good encouragement to us that the Lord knows. And on several of those letters, he says, I know your works. I hope that's good and not bad. He says, I know your works. And he says, be faithful. I'm going to write them down. I'm going to know. I'm going to individually walk in your midst, in the midst of the body, and I'm going to reward you by what you've done. And if you don't correct some things in your life, or if we don't correct some things in our life that we know that we carry in rebellion, then he says, I will bring you a discipline, a judgment. There will be a cost for those to correct us, and then I will reward you according to how you respond to me. He's a good father, and he's a good father to the church, and he's a good father to each one of us. And so we have gone obviously way past that now. We're in chapter 12. We're in study number 32. And in chapter 12, 13, 14, and 15, as I told you last week, there is a stepping away from the order we had starting in chapter 6, the beginning of the great tribulation period, which was 7-year period. Chapter 16 began to reveal the 7. Boy, you guys forget so fast. Not bowls. Chapter 16, the 7 seals. I'm 6. Sorry. How fast I'm already in 16. Chapter 6, the 7 seals. And Christ, who is the only one worthy of it because he's the only one who paid by his blood to purchase souls for the Father, is worthy to therefore take the seals, which is to have mastery, rule, kingship over what's going to happen on the earth and in heaven as God himself. He's the only one, because of his work of sacrificial payment, worthy of opening each seal. And we walked through each seal, and it led us to the seventh seal, which then at the seventh seal began the seven trumpets. We'll get that one together, correct. And then we've walked through the seven trumpets. Well, not quite. We got to the seventh trumpet, and in the midst of the seventh trumpet, we're going to have an opening of the seven bowls of God's wrath and judgment, which is the final 3.5 years of the tribulation. The trumpets are the workings of the overall tribulation, but particularly in the mid-tribulation period. And the trumpets the bowls of wrath are the last 3.5 years that God pours out his full anger and wrath on the wicked. And it's my theology, my understanding that at the beginning of the tribulation, the church will be raptured, and so what is left are all who have rejected Christ, all who have neglected Christ, all those who created a new Christ, all those who did not find it good or worthy to study the Scripture to know the true Christ and his true kingdom and his true righteousness. And so they created their own, which will not be raptured, which will not be given eternal life with him. And so he will then take that group of people and begin to put them through the first 3.5 years of tribulation. And in that first 3.5 years particularly, and then it's going into the second 3.5 years, there will be people who will awaken. And in particular, we'll study the 144,000 Jews that will come to salvation. We and Israel as a nation will be awakened to Jesus as the Messiah. And we will see that some Gentiles will come to Christ, and everyone who comes to Christ in the tribulation period will wish they had done it before. That should encourage us to be faithful to our witness. And they will all endure some persecution of it or another, and a large percentage of them will be martyred for the name of Christ. And we've studied all that in the chapters 5. And then we get to a place now in chapter 12 where the order of events pauses, and John begins to receive a list or a kind of a backdrop saying, okay, let me stop the order of events here that are the chronological order of events that are going on, and let me give you a better understanding of the characters, the persons, creatures, people, some case spirits, demons, in other cases. Let me give you all of the persons that are involved in this particular 7-year period of tribulation and what they're doing. And so we have 7 persons that are introduced to us in chapter 12 and 13. And then in chapter 14 and 15, we'll see some of the events that these 7 people, I'll call them people, that these 7 people are carrying out. Some of them, and by people, some of them are demon spirits, some of them are angels, some of them are the Lord himself. So we'll see what each one of them, what they're doing in chapter 14 and 15, but really chapter 12 and 13 are an introduction to these 7. And I thought, well, I'm just going to go through these 7 quickly tonight, but you know me. I'm going to go through, if all goes well, the first 3. So we have here, if you look at your notes, we have 7 individuals, maybe I could have put, that appear in chapters 12 and 13. And the first one is a woman clothed with sun, with the sun representing Israel, verses 1 and 2. We'll cover that in a minute. And then second, we have the red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, representing Satan. We'll do that in verse 3 and 4. We'll do that tonight, Lord willing. And the third one is the male child, representing Christ, and we'll do that verse 5 and 6, Lord willing, tonight. And then I actually have finished number 4, the Archangel Michael, which really covers verses 7 through 12. But I looked at my notes. I said, there's no way I'm going to get through it. So I took that section, I copied it and pasted it, and I put it in next week's lesson. Because Michael takes a lot more verses and there's more activity going on with him. And then number 5, we have the offspring of the woman, which is persecuted by the dragon, which we'll talk about. And then we have the beast of the sea, the future world dictator, the Antichrist, which is in verses 2 through 10 of 13. And I'm not sure I can cover more in that many verses, but we'll see. And then number 7 is the beast out of the earth, which is the false prophet, which will be verses 11 to 18. So these individuals are the ones that are driving the events during this tribulation period. I mean, obviously they're there before and they're after, but it's talking about the specific events that they're engaged in during this tribulation period. And then when we get back to chapter 16, we'll go back to chronological pursuit of the time frame, which is the bowls of God's anger, wrath poured out on the earth and on all the wicked, actually. So kind of look forward to get to chapter 16. But let me tell you about 12 through 15. I've read them. I basically I have time to go through about 3 different commentators, and I intentionally picked one. I picked 2 of them that pretty distinctly don't agree with each other. And another one, every now and then agrees with one of those 3 or is kind of off, maybe a little bit more kind of far in his creative thinking. And sometimes I just laugh and say, where did he get that? But I tried to just use him to give me a little, between the 3, to give me an overall perspective of what the different basic thoughts are on these verses, on people who are highly educated, people who try to write and study deeply into these things and try to learn from them. But then I have to settle in, what is it that I think I can teach and that I can support and that I think seems to best fit the scripture we're reading. And I give you what I have. I give you what they have. And I pray the Holy Spirit teaches us, rather than trying to say he's right, he's wrong, or Rick's right and they're wrong, or Rick's wrong and they're right. Rather that we say, I see some principles at work that apply to me. And really, that's really why the Lord would save any verse of Scripture, that the church, that the saints, that we would be able to hear him, we would be able to see him, we would be able to know him, which, as I've always told you, the Bible overall purpose is the revelation of the Son of God. The Bible is designed primarily to give us the revelation of God. And that's its really ultimate purpose. And we don't get to that 1,000-year reign until probably chapter, I think, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, right in there. So we're in a period here, we're in a spot here where we're going to look at these characters and what they have to do and what their role is in this mid period. And so understand what we're reading here, I believe, is in the tribulation period. And, you know, it's very easy to say, well, Rick, if you think we're going to be raptured before the tribulation, who cares? Why do we study this? Why is it important? Well, you can ask the Lord why he put it in the book for you. He can ultimately tell you why it's important and why he wants you to know and why we should read it and study it and understand it and learn from it, because he offered 3 blessings in verse 3 of chapter 1. Blessed are those who read these out loud. Blessed are those who hear these things out loud. And blessed are those who guard or keep these things. So the Lord has very specific purpose for you and me out of each one of these things and how we live, because it determines, and quite frankly, I think in these last days before we're raptured, I pray and I trust that it will make you fearless. I pray and hope that it will encourage you and motivate you and fan a flame in you, in your spirit, to burn for the Lord, knowing that all things are set, knowing that your future is secure, knowing that the Lord is going to protect and bless you and rapture you and reward you and keep you with him eternally, but knowing that the Lord wants us to rule and capture his creation. When he started with Adam, did he not say what? Adam, you're the ultimate greatest creation I've made. You're different from the inanimate. You're different from the animal, the plant life. So therefore, I want you to 2 things. Have dominion, rule over my creation. And the second thing? To multiply, to fill it, to bring his glory in his life through his saints upon his own creation. And let me tell you, at the end of it all, when we get to the end into the millennial stage, 1,000-year reign of Christ, that's what happens. We return the 1,000-year reign of Christ. It's nothing more than the garden in chapter, end of 1, beginning of 2, a little bit into 3, I guess. 2 and 3, not 1, 2 and 3. In Genesis, it's his rule. It's the Lord walking on the earth, ruling, enjoying his creation with his sons and daughters, his saints. And that's the beauty of this study. Regardless of whether we agree on who exactly is the woman clothed with the sun, or the red dragon, the male child, the archangel, the offspring, the beast of the sea, or the beast of the earth. I mean, I think we can understand those scripturally, but even beyond that, the real question is, who are you? Who are you in this story? Who are you in times of tribulation? And if we begin to see the Antichrist or Antichrists and their movement, who are you in those times? As we're getting into times of persecution, even now, as we're getting into times where it is considered, I'm not going to go all the words, but a bad thing to believe in Jesus Christ and his righteousness and his holiness and his purposes of life. It's bad. And you will be pretty much routinely condemned anywhere in general society now if you believe in these things. So be strong, my brothers and my sisters. Be strong as we study this. So let's look at the woman in chapter 12 of the Revelation. Somebody read verse 1 for me.
And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars.
I'll go ahead and read 2.
She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth.
Oh. If you've given birth, you can relate to this. If you've been standing by the bedside, you can almost relate to this. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. All right. The first person, this woman that we study, was a woman that appeared in heaven in a great sign. She was, it's saying, she is a great sign. And that great sign was Jesus? No. 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 The woman. Who's the woman? The woman is a great sign. It's the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel that was born through help me out. Abraham and Sarah. Okay, I didn't hear Abraham. I know, I heard that. Through Abraham and Sarah. Abraham is considered the father of this great sign, of this woman. Abraham and Sarah are the parents of this woman. And, of course, to Abraham and Sarah was born two sons, but the one that got the promise, got the, was who? Jacob or Isaac? Isaac, correct. You're doing good. And then to Isaac was born two sons, Jacob and Esau, twins. And the promise went through, well, let me back up here. Along with Isaac was born another son to a handmaiden. Do you remember Ishmael, who is the father of the Arabic nations and race? And then was born Jacob, and to him was born, it was Esau and Jacob, but the promise went through Jacob, and to him were born, I'm not going to ask you for to name the tribes, the sons, but were the 12 sons, which made the 12 tribes. So here we have, she's the great sign. At the right time, before him, of course, we read the creation period. We read man trying to struggle, trying to know God, and we see men falling into great wickedness, and their attempt to become God was symbolized through the creation of the Tower of Babel, which they say we will rise to the sky, into the heavens, and we will build our way up into heaven, and we'll be as God. It's very symbolic of Satan. And because the people were exceedingly wicked, and God repented that he had made man, and you got to know your Bible, your biblical history, then he destroyed the earth with a flood, and from the flood came the family of... Okay. Through Moses came, Moses. Through Noah came. Yep. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the covenant came through Shem. That's right. And we get to a place of, after the destruction of the earth, that God began to put a permanent salvation, permanent covenant in place, and he found a man named Abraham and began the process of creating a nation, a people, and she is the great sign, Israel, that came when the nation was finally born through Jacob and his 12 sons, who came out of Egypt after the 400 years. The woman was ready to be born as a nation. They were a people, but they were a people without land. They were nomadic people. and God gave them a kingdom when he sent them after cleansing them 40 years in the desert across the river Jordan into the land of Canaan. That's right. This is all good stuff. And there in Canaan was born a nation with a geographical territory, and this is the woman, the nation of Israel. The woman was a great sign, and why was she a great sign? Because from her would come Jesus, the salvation of mankind. And so there through many signs, many miracles, this woman is shown as really the most significant of the signs, the first sign that was decided, seen in heaven, but played out on earth. And this woman, as I put in my notes, was symbolized in, and the Bible is so symbolic in so many ways. There's multi-layers. One layer is a symbolic layer. Another one is a literal playing out of how it works. And another one, the third layer, is the promise of what it's going to turn into, what is yet to come. So everything has a past that it's built through, seen through, and has what it actually turned out to be, and then has the promise that it's going to be. So here we see this woman symbolizing Israel, seen early in Genesis 37, 9 through 11. Does anybody know what's in 39 through 11? Chapter 37, verse 9 through 11. The story of Joseph. Let's read it real quick. Genesis comes right before Revelation, I think. 39, verse 7 through 11. I'm sorry. 37, is it? 37. I'm in the wrong book chapter. 37. Y'all help me today. 9 through 11. Let's read that. Then he, who's he? Joseph. Go ahead, somebody.
Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?
Oh, my goodness.
And his,
That's good. That's good. That's good. Oh, no. Go ahead and read 11. Yeah, I'm sorry.
and his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind.
That's right. So Joseph dreamed another dream, told it to his brothers, says, I dreamed another dream. Oh, they were not happy. Behold, the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bound down to me. Who were the 11 stars? His brothers. Who were the sun and the moon? Mom and dad, named Jacob and Rebekah. But when he told it to his father and his brothers, they got mad at him and said, Shall I, your mother, and your brothers indeed bow down to you once before the ground? Of course, we know literally they had to do that as he was the leader of Egypt later on. So here we have, back to Revelation 12, 1 and 2, a great sign of Israel, the nation, the Jewish foundation, a woman clothed with sun. What is that sun? Glory. Clothed with the glory of God. With the moon under her feet, creation, the sun would be the glory of God, spiritual realm, in the spiritual realm, and the moon would be God's glory more in the physical realm. This nation would have glory in the realm, the spiritual realm, and in the physical realm. And on her head a crown of 12 stars of this nation. This woman of Israel, of course, is the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 stars. And she was pregnant and was crying in birth pains and agony to give birth. She was being birthed as a nation, and she was birthing a nation. And of course, this nation was to birth the Messiah. And so you can take it at multiple levels, that Israel was in great birth pains to be birthed as a nation itself, and then to birth the nation, a formal nation in Canaan, came at great pain, great cost, wars, and miracles of God for her to birth a nation, Israel. But more, it's really referring to birthing a son. This woman can symbolically refer or infer Mary. Also, some commentators say, well, this could be said about Mary, who in great labor birthed the son, Jesus, the Messiah. But it's really others. Let me back up here. One of the other commentators says, oh, no, it's talking about birthing of the nation of Israel eventually birthed the church. And the church, through great pain, was born. But I don't think that really fits the narrative of this story. I think that's stretching because it can't meet all the criteria of what's to come. So we're going to leave it that this woman is the nation of Israel, and with great pain is going to birth itself. She's going to birth a nation, a formal nation of the 12 sons who are going to birth the Messiah, and that's going to be one of. But then that's the good on the earth. But then we have the enemy. Rises up in verse 3, the dragon. So let's read verse 3 and 4. Somebody else read verse 3 for me.
And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems.
Diadems,
His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it.
Okay. This is why it can't be the church. Some say, well, Satan's been after the church to devour the church, but the church was not really directly born out of Israel, but it was really born out of the Son of God, his covenant. So verse 3 says, then another sign, the second sign, appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and on the 7 heads, 7 diadems. Stop there for a minute. The second sign again appears in heaven, plays out on earth. Let me tell you, it's this principle I'm always teaching. The reality of everything starts and is founded in the spiritual realm of God in heaven. As God decides, so the earth plays out. As his rule, as he sits on the throne of heaven, as his rule is revealed or it's advanced, it is manifested on the earth. There is nothing on the earth that is not first manifested in the will of God, in the sovereign rule of God, and in the control of God. And that's why it's very important, my brothers and sisters, that you understand your life is founded not on people, not on governments, not on your own efforts, but is founded at the very footstool, you might say, of the throne of the Father and the Son as they sit in their throne of rule. And our future is in their rule. The decisions they make is what sovereignly, minimally, and directly, in many cases, plays out in our lives. They will see that everything that they have determined to be is completed for you and for us on the earth. And this all brings glory that God rules through imperfect creation to return to himself perfect glory, righteousness, and love. He reveals himself through all of this that we're experiencing. So, right in the midst of this, we have the great dragon, the great red dragon. The red, I don't know why red is always tied up with Satan. It might mean that he's always causing the spill of blood. It also might mean that in all religions and all understandings of men, witchcraft, demons, and their works always are seen in some crimson, some reddish color, and it has a connotation of evil, this color for him. This great, and this great does not mean wonderful. Great means, in comparison of creation, very strong and very powerful. So there's 7 heads, and man, I looked about 4 or 5 different places for the 7 heads and couldn't find anything very affirming or very anybody who had much of an answer. A lot of uncertainty about what these 7 heads, and of course, I think that some of the things I kind of picked up is this using of the 7 heads is trying to steal of the perfect work. Remember when God, everything he's doing in 7, and we know that Satan is a great impersonator and he's a great thief, and so he's trying to steal the imagery of God in this 7 heads, talking about his rule is multiplied times 7, multiplied in his attempt to have perfection. His rule is a multiplicity of the perfect rule of power. So 7 head represent very powerful, kind of without limit power. But that's about as far as I could get. It's nowhere else further down in Scripture does it define that these 7 heads represent individuals. And some people have said, well, they are 7 kings of past or 7 world rules like the Greek Napoleon and the Romans and so on and so forth. It's possible. I'll just leave it as not very certain. It's uncertain. But this dragon represents himself with 7 heads and the 10 horns, and it does go on, and there's other places we'll study, we'll see, including in Daniel. These 10 horns symbolize world leaders that are under his control during the time of the tribulational rule. He will rule as a great dictator through his Antichrist, and the Antichrist will divide the world up into 10 authorities, whether they're called nations or people in positions across the continents, and there will be 10 world leaders under his control, and because the horn is always a symbol of power, and then we have the 7 crowns on his head, symbolizing again his perfect rule or his crowning over man. And again, you got 7 heads, you got 7 crowns to go on the 7 heads. So if it does mean world leaders that are represented through the 7 heads and then 10 more regional leaders, we don't know. But it does say he's going to rule. And his crown means that he's going to have authority over men and over the earth for a period of time. So verse 12:9, what does verse 12:9 say? Go ahead.
And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world.
Okay, that great dragon is identified as Satan, the deceiver. So we know that this great dragon is Satan, and his rule is through his Antichrist beast. We see that given to us in Daniel 7. It's described how he rules through this beast. Go to the book of Daniel. Shall arise, and another shall arise after them. He shall be different from the former ones, and he shall put down 3 kings. So we got this same horn being the rulers of the earth under him. And then, of course, we got in Revelation 13:1. And all over the place. The whole book is tied together. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its head. So we have this Antichrist that he is ruling through. The great dragon is ruling through. So going back to verse 3, another sign appeared in the heavens. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail, now this one gets difficult. Well, it gets difficult in that there's a lot of a variety of ideas. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman. Well, let's stop here before that part. This concept of his tail sweeping down a third of the stars of the heavens and cast them to the earth. I'm going to go with the one that I pretty much settled in at. At the 3.5-year mark of the tribulation, when Satan is setting up his kingdom and his rule, and he deceives Israel, and he goes in and he sits down on the Holy of Holies, declares himself God, and commands everybody to worship him. At this 3.5-year moment, something is happening in heaven. And according to this, one view is that he deceived, and this was the fall, or this is one of the deceptions when he was cast out of heaven. And what we have a picture of up until this time, like we see in the book of Job. He goes up into heaven and he accuses the brethren. But at this point, he is cast unto earth in not being able to accuse in heaven the brothers, but he is given rule with a third of the demons that came with him, the angels that came with him, that are now demons. He is given rule on the earth. A third of the angels. This is talking about his fall from heaven, and it's being manifested now when he is basically being shut out of ability to return to heaven at the 3.5-year period. 2 Peter 2:4 tells us, for if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, and it goes on to say, why be careful about us. Jude 1, or really Jude 6, it's only one chapter, verse 6. And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, God has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. The great day is talking about the tribulation time of judgment. Isaiah 14:12 and 15 says, how have you fallen from heaven, O day star? Talking about Satan, son of dawn, Lucifer. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God. I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the far reaches of the earth, of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. So we see this battle of Satan when he is finally cast out of heaven, and he knows now, at this point, Satan knows now that he's never going to return to heaven, that he's never going to sit on the throne of God, he's never going to get ultimate rule, and he knows that his time is short. And we're going to read that in the preceding sections. But another version of this third of the stars being pulled down is that satanic power extended into the heavens and into the earth, and talking about literally even the physical stars that he pulled down into destruction, a third of all the stars into, not in effect, in his anger and his rule on creation itself, the heavens being the celestial heavens. He throws a third of the celestial heaven into chaos and disorder, and a third of all that is on the earth into chaos and disorder. And so he brings it all down into destruction through his tail, which is his representing kind of his back end, his dirtiness. Satan in this thing is showing, extending his power both in the spiritual realm, in the physical realm, and even in the human and political realm. Can't really go with that view. I'm pretty much feel like we're referring to his being cast out of heaven and the time when he took all the demons. Now, some people have said he was cast out of heaven to the earth at the beginning of the tribulation. Some people say he was cast out. Some of these views are he's not cast out of heaven until mid-trib, in the middle 3.5 years. But boy, who's been doing all this bad stuff in the whole church age? So I don't think that any of those really match up. I think that there was a time that the Bible has never fully disclosed when the rebellion of Satan. I'd probably go most likely with one theory, commentator theory, that says he was cast out of heaven during chapter 2 of Genesis. At the end of creation, somewhere between the end of creation and in the garden time, and we don't know how extended the garden time was that Adam and Eve walked with God. We don't know if that was days or that was tens of thousands of years in a sense. We don't know. But we do know that Satan appeared in the garden time, which means he was no longer Lucifer. He was no longer the angel of light in heaven. So during the creation period, I go with what we can know is somewhere between when God decided to create and sometime in the garden, Lucifer was cast down. But his rule begins to come to an end as he enters into the great tribulation period. And these thousands of years that have occurred from the Garden of Eden until the tribulation period, by most creation scientists, say our Earth, we'll just call it from 4,000 to 6,000 years old, which doesn't fit any other model of evolution, but evolutionary models don't fit a lot of reality of scientific evidence either. So I'm just going to go somewhere between, let's just say 6,000 years before Christ to the tribulation period is the full length of Satan's fallen period. Between the time that the garden, he was found in the garden, through the end of the tribulation, he knows that's his door. That's his end. He knows he doesn't have any more time, any more rule, any more freedom at the end of the tribulation period. So he's been very active, very focused, very determined. So this dragon attempts to devour the newborn child. As Satan attempted to both destroy Israel, which could have been what was birthed in one theory, but probably being Christ again, the child, he attempted to destroy Jesus, going all the way back even into the lineage of David and going even all the way into the male children of Moses. And Satan is always trying to kill that first male-born child, trying to hopefully hit his lottery of killing the Son of God. And, of course, we know that when Jesus is born, then here comes, who was that guy who came and killed all the children? Herod came and killed all the children from age 30 and down? 2 and down. This is the picture of Satan, the great dragon, trying to devour this newborn male child who was born through the woman, the nation of Israel. His war is evident through the Old Testament, the New Testament, and his probably best moment of success where he thought he had done it was, guess where? On the cross. I have killed the Son of God. No, you have fulfilled the Son of God's work for him to set free all from death, hell, and sin. Satan himself was defeated. So let's look at this male child. The third person that we look at, and it's the last one we're going to look at, is the male child in verses 5 and 6. Let's read that. Somebody read that, verse 5 for me.
She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days.
All right. There's a male child. I don't want to go too far with this, but this is very gender affirming. He wasn't born however he felt he wanted to be that day. He wasn't born with multiple boxes to check. The child, a son, a male child, is of course Jesus Christ. And it says that he shall rule all the nations with a rod of iron. In Psalms 3:9 it says, you shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Revelation 19:15 says, from his mouth comes a sharp sword from which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. What do you think this rod of iron is representing? Powerful, unrestrained authority. The Son of God has unrestrained authority. Humans are even worse under his foot. Mankind is his creation. All that exists in the creation is under his full, final authority. one thing I find interesting, kind of goes along with this, the great calming, soothing psalm of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lay down in green pasture. He leads me beside still water. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod, which is a rod of discipline, and a rod of fighting the enemy when the wild animals came to eat the sheep. It's the rod that he used to defend, to fight, to punish, to discipline, to correct, to control. And your staff, which is the comforter, which pulls the sheep back to him, which guides him. So there's a picture, there's this picture of discipline and comfort. Well, at this point, when we see this male child, he's walking with a rod of iron. He's walking with at this point of the tribulation period, there's no comfort. There's no staff of comfort. There's just a rod of judgment and punishment, discipline. So we see this with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. When was he caught up to God? When? Speak it up. Emily's not saying nothing. Thank you, Cole. She's looking at you. The ascension. Mount of Olives. He ascended. In the same place he taught, and the same place he returns. So, this child was caught up to God. He is ascended back to God. It is not talking about the rapture of the church. It's not talking about the rapture of individuals. It's talking about the Lord Jesus Christ coming to the earth, returning back to his Father. So all these things are not chronological, remember. So quit trying to, don't sit there, wait, how does that fit? We just did this. This is not a chronological story. This is talking about events. This is giving backdrop. This is giving support. So this child is going to be caught up to God. He's ascending back to God's throne, or to his own throne. And the woman fled. Now this, no, not 40 years. Had another zero. 400 years. And then came the rod of Moses to discipline and to break the back of Pharaoh and Egypt. And Egypt, quite frankly, is seen throughout the Revelation as one of a great wicked nation who captured, imprisoned, who persecuted and put the woman, the nation of Israel, through great trial and tribulation, and Egypt's back was broken by the rod of God through Moses, and they went to the desert for 400 years? Oh, now it's 40. Okay, 40 years, led by the rod or the staff of Moses, which brought them water and food and healings and corrections. And so we see this woman symbolized, went through the desert in Israel, but now in a literal sense, we're talking about this woman in the time of tribulation is Israel in the time of the great tribulation. And she, the 144,000, and the nation as a whole, we're going to read later in the chronological order, comes to Christ, comes to believe and to submit to him as the Messiah. And as Israel comes to Christ, the Antichrist rises up, and he makes Israel the first point of his persecution. His anger, as Satan has always demonstrated, is against the Jews, against the people of God. And so if you read in Matthew 24, it says, if you're on the rooftop, do not come down. If you're in the mountains, don't come back, because the great Antichrist, the beast, is going to come and persecute the Jew. And this is saying he's going to run the believing nation of Israel into the wilderness, which is outside of the glories and the provisions of law and money, and did not be able to buy, not be able to sell, will be struggling, will be persecuted, will be incarcerated, will be martyred. And so there's this picture of the woman fleeing from the Antichrist, Israel, the new believers, the Jew in particular, but there'd be Gentiles, but it's really talking about the Jews, will be persecuted and run out of their nations, out of their comforts, out of their abilities to buy and purchase and to own. So they are run off. The woman fled into a wilderness, running from the Antichrist. This is now we're at this point of the 3.5 years when he sits on the mercy seat in the Holy of Holies and declares himself God and begins to persecute the people of God who now believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God. But he says he takes them to a place that has been prepared by God. We don't know. I've read a couple places. It could be this valley. It could be this mountain range. It could be these things. But, what it really means is that as God took care of Elijah when he fled and fed him and gave him water and had the ravens bring him meat, as God took care of, Elijah was also took care of him with the widow, and the oil and the whatever the bread meal stuff never ran out. So God takes care of his people, Israel, in this 3.5 year, the second 3.5 year period, because there must be survivors on the earth, human new believers that were not believers at the beginning of the tribulation, or they would have got raptured, that came to Christ in the first 3.5, and Israel comes to Christ in the second 3.5 years. That nation will be the basis of which God repopulates the earth over the 1,000-year rule of Christ. And we will be with him, the church, because we were raptured, in the New Jerusalem, helping his rule. So here's a really cool picture. God prepares a place in the wilderness, hiding them from the Antichrist. He gives them, what he does is he says, I'm going to protect them so they can live, so I have a nation to build with my kingdom at the end of the second 3.5 year period of the tribulation, which it says he put them in a place prepared by God to which she is to be nourished for that 1,260 days is that 3.5 years. Pretty cool. 42 months of 30 days each. So this was where we saw Matthew 24:16, Mark 13:14, which says, run. It refers to the flight of Israel at the beginning of this, the great tribulation. The first 3.5 years is called the tribulation, and the second 3.5 years is called the great tribulation. All of a sudden it gets bad. So let's move on because I got to close. Oh, that's it. I'm out of notes. I moved all my other notes to my next lesson. Take courage. We might experience a little tribulation, not great tribulation. There is some great tribulation on the earth. Not yet here. I'm not sure how much greater the tribulation will get with us, but it may before the rapture, because the Lord said, I will not put you through the great day of judgment. I believe at least talking about the last 3.5 years, if not the first 3.5 also. So be courageous. Wait until the last moment the Lord to come, or you to go to Him. Trust Him, sleep well, work hard, love God with all your heart. And we'll get to the fourth person in the next lesson. You're dismissed.